Hello and welcome back to ThoughtBot's AI in Focus. I'm developer and CEO of ThoughtBot, Chad Pytel, and today I'm joined by Director of Software Development, Richard Newman. Richard, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Chad.
So why don't you tell folks a little bit, this is your first time on AI in Focus, although we have streamed together before. So where are you located? A little bit about yourself.
Yeah, you bet. I am up in beautiful Boise, Idaho. So it's just now switching over to spring, getting a little warmer out here, a little more sunshine, which always helps me out a little bit. Yeah,
I'm laughing because that's not my impression of Boise, Idaho, and the fact that we are now under like 2.5 feet of snow here in Boston. So
yeah, you've had a much different winter than we have had in spring. So it actually, for the first time in my life, because I've always been in the Pacific Northwest, I was actually able to use the grill on Christmas Day. So that is just unbelievable to me. So
wow.
yeah.
Okay, so this is the launch or the start of a new season of AI in Focus. And this new season of AI in Focus, we are going to actually be creating a new real product at ThoughtBot. And so we're getting started today with the initial planning session, brainstorming features, identifying the MVP, and identifying what we're going to work on next episode at the end. And what we are doing is we are creating an AI-powered Rails app generator. If you're familiar with these kinds of things like Lovable, there's V0, there's a few of them out there, and they help people rapidly go from nothing to something. Richard, what has been your experience with these tools?
Yeah, I've tried a couple of the different ones. So for instance, Lovable's got an interface that allows you to go ahead and say what you want for the application to do. It'll present a screen that shows you what UI it might have, and it'll let you run and play with that screen as you're working along, and you can review the code if you want to. Mm-hmm. And I'll let you have that conversation with it, pretty straightforward. B0 has somewhat the same flavor, but they're pretty bounded in the sort of how far they can go with it, what sort of tech stack they can use, where they're hosted, and so forth. The other experience that I've had is trying to work with, say, Claude code and mm-hmm. have that conversation there. And you have to be pretty directive in stacking it up, because now you're working with a more general purpose sort of setting. But they've been interesting, they've been promising, and they do let you sort of explore some of the ideas, and they do kind of reveal some of the things you might take for granted when you're doing this.
Yeah. And admittedly, they've come quite a bit since they first started. You know, when they first got started, they primarily just created a stateless, or it had some state, but a React app that didn't have a back end. It was mostly like a clickable prototype, and it would sort of save state, but if you refreshed, you would lose everything.
Mhm.
And now they've advanced to the point where they're using back-end services and that kind of thing, like Supabase. Um, but it still um, lacks something to really be able to go from that to a launchable product. And if you've been watching AI in Focus, you've been seeing how at Thoughtbot we've been using tools like Claude Code and Rails to go from a product design sprint where we're identifying the critical path, identifying what the first version of the product might be, then rapidly building that out and testing it with real users. And what would have normally been done in a clickable prototype tool like Figma or something like that, we're able to create a Rails app that serves those purposes, but also puts us in a position where if that product continues, we can continue the next week working in that app. We've already done test driven development. It already has tests. It's already to our best practices. It's already ready to go. And we're able to continue on that foundation to production. And so that is the promise of the tool that we're going, the product that we're going to create. Is that it is a Rails application generator powered by AI that helps people rapidly create the first versions of products that can be tested with real users. But it's built in Rails with a real backend and real models and real databases and real best practices. And these applications should not be throwaway prototypes, but that they can serve as the foundation to continue design and development and bring the product to launch. Anything to add, or that's sort of the product statement that I put together, Richard. Anything to add or change or question?
No, but I do want to emphasize that point you made about making a real application that you can move forward with, because
Mm-hmm.
I think that, using things like the other products we talked about, that's pretty early in the process. You're kind of wanting to be able to do more with it than you could do there. So being able
Yeah.
to take this forward is huge.
And I think the other thing that this is going, oh, I'm getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but um, the ability to drop down into the code
Mhm.
and uh, do things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do with the back end, because you can do it in the front end with Lovable. You can get in the code but with the actual back end, I think is going to be very powerful, not only for users, but for us as users. Oh, we're trying to get this done. It's not working out the way that we want in the context of a sprint, which is pretty intense. And we don't want to get blocked. We don't want to lose an hour. So the ability to drop down and make a change, I think, is going to be pretty powerful. So the goal today is to understand our core user, the use cases, and the value proposition of the initial version of this product. Brainstorm the ideas, talk through challenges, ultimately working towards identifying what we believe the MVP looks like. And we're working on a FigJam board here. So we've got our board laid out. We're going to be able to do these things. I am monitoring the chat. So if you've got any ideas or questions or comments along the way, feel free to drop them in there, and we'll see them and address them when we can. And then as the final step, we're going to identify what we are going to build on next week's AI in Focus. Next week, I expect that we're going to start from scratch. We're going to actually create the repo, which is going to be public. We're going to start development on whatever we identify the first thing to work on is. And we, as of right now, we officially give ourselves a ticking clock, because next week we're going to need to create that repo, and we're going to need to have a name on that repo. So if you've got any ideas for the name for this product, we'd love to hear it. Feel free to leave them as a comment or drop them in the chat on this. We've got a lot of ideas ourselves, but it's always fun to brainstorm names. Okay, anything else before we move on?
No, let's dive in.
Okay, so I'm going to set a timer so we stay on track here for 30 minutes. Oh, I clicked the wrong thing. Okay. Okay, what do we got here?
Well, I think straight up, we wanted to produce a Rails app, so it's going to establish that initial Rails out of the box that has a lot of the pieces and parts that we expect to need. Basically, if I say to the app, say to our generator, hey, I want to build an app that does X, first part of that is building the app.
So prompt a user for the app they want to build, or the other way around?
Yeah, I think at least it's the way I approach it is you kind of say what it is you want the app to do, but it's that one key feature you're looking for, and that kind of gets the conversation started. So
yeah. And I think that's something that we can guide the user to is, even if they respond with the app is going to do this and this and this and this, okay, what's the most important thing? Or who's the core user of this product? And my hope is that we can not only make people who never come to us more successful with their product, with this tool, but also set them up, if they do come to us to continue on, that they'll have thought through their idea a little bit more, who the core users are, what the most important features are. And I think we can, so I guess like guiding questions, agent asks guiding questions to the user to identify the right product to build. Is that what we're saying?
yeah, I mean, we're used to doing this in conversation with folks we work with. So yeah, we'll definitely have those questions, and understanding, like you said, the audience. I think those would be key.
Yeah, so maybe we'll add some examples here. Audience, core value prop, industry.
Yeah, if they're working with like it's just a new product or something that's, connecting or augmenting something else that they have elsewhere that we want to attach to.
Integrations.
Integrations. That would be the concise way to say the long form.
This occurs to me. There's really no integrations. Didn't I spell it? There's really no way, or I could envision that we actually, like, I know users probably want to get to building right away. They want to see the wow, right? But there's no reason why we couldn't actually take them with an agent through a mini, like what we're doing here. What are the features? And then just getting all the ideas out, then narrowing it down with an exercise. Like, we're going to do needs, wants, and we're not going to do desires. We're just going to do needs and wants. But there are other ones, impact versus effort. There's a lot of different exercises. You could, maybe this is a separate tool that leads into this one, like the product design sprint tool. But is it integrations?
No, I thought you had it right before.
I think
So
it is. I don't know what's going
yeah,
on there.
yeah.
Um,
Everybody watching probably can see it
yeah,
immediately. So
yeah. I don't know. Um,
the, you're right. When we walk through the design sprints, we're usually asking some of those questions. But one of the other things that we do is we do maybe have a sketch, or at some point, someone will step away and then come back with an image or a prototype or wireframes of some things. Um, in in the app generation world, that's kind of a version of just quickly generating the screen itself and letting you see it.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, but more from the vein of trying to lift out what it is you're thinking, help support those questions as you're going forward. So yes, it does help build the app, but it also helps further that conversation as you're going along.
So I think the idea is if the tool uncovers unknowns, run the user through exercises to answer that. Whew. Okay, I did it.
Okay. Um, the other thing that kind of comes up at some point, and this kind of gets into the needs wants thing, but right off the bat, there's some just general needs that one would assume when you're coming up with once you talk about the audience. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, user accounts is one that,
Yeah.
almost invariably comes out pretty quickly, because you need to protect, data, or you need to keep things connected to who's using the application. If it's really simple, like, you know, an online calculator or something, you might have a situation where that's not the case. But that's really unusual, especially for the kind of applications we're used to building.
Yeah. The in fact, I think this is one of those things where as that we can provide a value to users, especially like sort of non-technical founder who's wants to use something like this to get started. There are certain things when we think about what do we do as we rapidly build any Rails application, even if we're not using a tool like this, that we want to do from day one because they save time and money later on by doing them from day one. So um, user accounts and like any account structure or team structure that sits over your whole entire data model, having to add that after the fact, when there was small things you could avoid a big project later on, is smart. Security is another one.
Mm-hmm.
um, so I think that is something like identify the correct security model and build it in. Actually, as I doing this, I think we should break these out. So the concept of like identifying the correct security model is different than security from day one. Because we could just
Right.
hard code a basic security model in and expectations in.
Yeah. And what you said about the user accounts and knowing that up on day one makes it much easier going forward. I think another question that we would want, to have asked before is, in the guiding questions, for instance, is do you expect to have other products integrate with your app? Meaning, we know that means, oh, we're going to have to expose an API. And if you know up front you're going to be dealing with API, if you
Mm-hmm.
know that you're going to be dealing with security, you can do that pretty easily as you go along instead of having to retrofit it later on.
Yep. Um, so generate an API if the app needs one. Along those same lines, a potential feature would be to um, ship with administrate admin. Well, let's not prescribe administrate. ship with admin interface
controls
from
and so
day
forth.
one.
Yeah. Yeah. And in fact, we know for some of our clients, depending on the answer to their questions about, audience and setting and so forth, they may need to know, who was doing what with the admin controls.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So at very least prompting the user about some of those things. I mean, that's probably kind of granular to some of those questions we would ask, but they're the sort of things we would ask in conversations ourselves as we're working with users, is making sure we have that kind of auditability or journaling that folks might need depending on when and where they're using their tool.
Yeah.
Testing, I think, is one of the things that we're very used to that we don't see as much in some of these
Mm-hmm.
app generators as well. Um, Having ways that you can tell up front, because a lot of times when I'm working with some of these tools, I have to like guide it through that entire approach, and there's ways I want to do it, and there's things that I think are worth writing tests about and things I don't think are worth writing tests about. But just having the tests right off the bat so you can make sure that it's doing what it needs to do from day one, that's another one of those things that's really hard to add later on if you need to.
Yeah. And so one of the challenges, so, at Thoughtbot, we're doing a lot of exploration with Claude Code and other agents to help us with our coding. And I was just talking with Will and Sammy on the Giant Robot Smashing Another Giant Robots podcast that we've got a good Claude MD file that helps Claude do that red green refactor cycle and all that stuff. But even that, an hour into a session, it will stop writing tests 1st.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like a challenge for these tools. And I was saying, like, if we can solve that so that it just happens consistently, that'll be really nice. And we were talking
Mm-hmm.
about strategies for doing that. And one strategy that I know about that I think will be worth experimenting with is basically having dual, like an agent monitoring the agent or as
Mm-hmm.
judge. So
Mm-hmm.
it's basically like you have one agent with like a core set of rules that it will never forget. And like that's all that it does is make sure that our best practices like test driven development and the red green refactor cycle are uh, are lived up to. And
Yep.
then it is monitoring the other agent so that you don't need to be the one to step in and say, it looks like you didn't write a test there, but that it's actually another agent that's doing that. That'll be those kinds of techniques that if we can crack them and they actually work to solve this problem, that's where you can really start to get into, oh, we're creating something that is not only that is very valuable.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, anything that frees me up from paying attention to the problem and not trying to think of the minutia as I'm
mm-hmm.
going through it, yeah, that's huge. So if it's constantly paying attention to the test first and prompting and using that to help prompt me for more questions to help define what it is I asked for, and not losing track of that, because you're right, it'll lose its spot and
Mm-hmm.
and so forth. So our solving that will let me pay attention to the problem I actually care about.
So I'm adding the ability to view the in-progress web app live. I think about features and what the user interface might be.
And I see a comment here, and I think this is a really important
Oh, I
point.
stopped watching the stream. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, yeah, no worries. Um, the the idea of versioning, that's another
Yeah.
thing that you really count on, is not because it, as you said, the AI also kind of forgets what it's doing, and making sure it's versioning so I can always have a baseline to retreat back to
Mm-hmm.
or pick up on, not to mention just having that as the record of how it progressed. Doing that from day one would be important.
Yeah. So I don't know exactly how to capture this, but so I'm gonna put one card as built-in versioning, and I'm gonna say versioning in Git, and then I'm gonna say GitHub integration. And then I'm going to say, I've got a whole, so then I'm going to say, a back-end service that is Git backed and allows you to go from development to production so users can access your app.
It's really interesting as we walk through this, because we take some of these things really for granted working in Rails, because it'll take care of some of that for us, or at least it's kind of forward. And along with that is the idea that you have these different environments. So it's not just having a database, it's a staging database or a sandbox database or a production database.
Yeah, that's a whole nother thing, right? So like a separate staging environment from production. Separate is another one of those words I always misspell.
One of the things that we were trying to not be too implementation dependent, but we just recently came out with Rue for our styling and so forth as a baseline, and working with some of these tools, having kind of that out of the box, well, we're going to style it this way because you asked for this, just to get us going, will be something that we need to blend in here, is having some conviction and at least starting defaults for how we want things displayed and styled and so forth as we're building on screens.
Yeah, starting defaults for styling, both visual look and feel. Actually, starting defaults for visual look and feel, and then starting defaults for good defaults for CSS and front end development. So I think we should be by default creating Hotwire, Stimulus, Turbo applications.
Absolutely. Yep. There should be a reason that someone has in what they're doing that would have us examine that closer. But yeah, that would be unlikely that we'd come up with too many. Even if it's eventually a mobile application, you can do that straight up with Hotwire. So also takes us in accessibility. Building in accessibility from day one is so much easier than trying to figure it out later on.
Yeah.
And it might require, asking a few questions here, but it also, having our tool ask the user, it's just another part of the audience, understanding how they might want to work with some of these things.
I think another idea for a feature, going back to the UI, would be not just defaults, and this would be, I don't think first version feature, but we're brainstorming all features, which is basically like being able to come up with a prompt the user for questions with questions that lead to a unique UI that they like.
Are you thinking brand? Are you thinking, aesthetic preferences? Where are you going with that?
Aesthetic preferences, or yeah.
I mostly was hoping you'd get a chance to spell aesthetic, but
I wasn't going to take aesthetic. I think one thing that's clear as we're brainstorming these things, that our goal with this really goes beyond what, like, it really is about creating an application with best practices that sets someone up for the future, something really real,
Mm-hmm.
that goes far beyond anything that nothing, as far as I know, nothing out there right now is as opinionated and as structured as this is going to be.
Yes, and it's another one of those things that we're used to taking for granted because we often
Mm-hmm.
work in frameworks that already have some of that. So doing that at this level makes a lot of sense. Um, we've already talked about a little bit with the styling. We've talked a little bit about with the testing,
Mm-hmm.
um, accessibility, all of those sorts of pieces, best practices all the way through.
Okay, one thing I'm going to throw out as a brainstorm feature is uh, the ability to interrupt the agent and provide correction when it is going off track.
A couple of other spots. This is um, having it keep readmes or documentation up to date as it goes along. Not that that
Mm-hmm.
needs to be overly in depth, but it does help when you're picking it back up later. Because we're expecting multiple people over time to potentially be working with this tool on the same application, maybe. Um, and building in some way that you support bug or issue or what have you. It's either things like Sentry or putting in GitHub issues or what have you. But if the
Mm-hmm.
user runs into some, I'm trying to think through some of the stuff that kind of takes up my overhead developing an application, but um,
Yeah.
another, kind of like user accounts does.
Boy, we're going to build a whole suite of products here.
That's right. That's right. Oh, yeah. Just get to add on
Um,
tools and features.
so one thing that we've talked, we've done a little bit of initial planning for this, and one thing that has come up is this idea of Lovable and V0 and these tools that are using JavaScript and JavaScript frameworks have this a little bit easier because they can present most of an application, especially if they're just making a clickable prototype, as a React app running in the user's browser. They don't need to spin up a bunch of server infrastructure and backends and databases and all that stuff. And to the extent that they do have backends, they're using services like Supabase and that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And they're not necessarily sandboxed from the other users. We don't know if they're sandboxed from the other users.
Yep.
So we need to tackle that. I think my recommendation is for now we capture this as many cards as we can. So how do we?
Well, part of it having some sort of small C container to to separate your application from anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Um, whether that's in the form of, it's going to be resident on your own machine, or it's the sort of thing that you can, pull out and install on your own machine as, I'm
Mm-hmm.
usually thinking like a Docker container or what have you.
Right.
Um, But then you also get all those local services that we've been chatting about, things like the databases and so forth, making sure those are available and separated out, and something that you can run with locally or in the sandbox environment or in a third-party staging environment that's your own, avoiding that kind of vendor dependencies, or at least giving you agency over
Right.
what vendors you're working with.
Ability to edit all of the source code for the
Mm-hmm.
application. User has complete ownership of everything produced. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
important. So that means we take into account licenses for open source and have a license of our own to users for ownership.
Yep. Yeah, and which then take that a step further is when you're working with this tool, you don't want to have to worry about some back-end AI training off of your data and compromising, any sort of, IP or sensitivity or confidentiality that you have going on. So yeah, you need the license, you need the terms of service, you need to know that the AI itself in practice is doing those things. You might be dealing with, CCPA and GDPR privacy concerns with some of what you're doing, especially if you're letting the user put in test data, making sure you're supporting some of that right out of the box.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, starting with license terms and things like that, and holding ourselves accountable to it.
So I'm going to articulate this next thing as a feature that we sort of took for granted, but user does not need to set up a Ruby on Rails development environment.
Yep. Yep. Do they need to set up the command line? I don't think so. We don't want them to have to do that.
Should we say, or any other development tools?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the minute we say something like Xcode to people, it's going to really limit who the tool can be used by.
What else? I'm sure that there's things we're taking for granted.
One of the things that it quickly runs into, in fact, present conversation included, it's really easy to start having these branches that just take off on you. And having, this process here will take us into the needs, wants, and so forth. But there's always going to be these ideas that you have going on that you kind of wanted to go ahead and create tickets for, things that you're not going to deal with now. You know it's a good idea, but you don't want to forget it. And so, yeah, some sort of integration or support for capturing or ideas to come back to later.
We'll call it the parking lot.
Yeah, because I'll get in these conversations with an AI and I'll start suggesting stuff and we'll go kind of explore some things. And then before I know it, I got 5 different things and I picked one, but I didn't want to let go of the other ones.
So Clarissa asks, what kind of interface are we thinking about? They are going to create all that through a website. That's one of the challenges we have when we get back down to this issue here. A user does not need to set up a Ruby on Rails development environment or any other tools. And when we talk about spinning up the database and the services and sandboxing environments from other people, I think we do have we need to figure out what the first version of this looks like and where it actually runs. I personally am a little concerned about the feasibility of doing all of this server side as part of the first version. But I also, that's a comfort space for me, like working server side as opposed to doing client development. I also suspect that users aren't like a tool where they're just going on a website and creating an app without having to download something, that kind of thing. That's probably more attractive to people.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be either or all the way through. In other words, you could start out where, yeah, you don't have to download everything. We're doing it through the website, and then it gets to a certain level of, complexity or sophistication or what have you. And it's gone far enough along that they want to be able to work with it more locally, or even speed. There could be some practical reasons where And now they're invested enough, and we're all invested enough that maybe then it makes sense for this to offer, hey, do you want to pull this down? And here we can help you do that. Um, and depending on where we want to take it, we could even offer deployment scripts. I'm thinking
Mm-hmm.
Terraform, but it can be whatever it needs to be that helps them provision the things they need to be able to do that without having to know about it too much, and can still have the overall same experience regardless of where it's resident.
So we have 23 seconds left in this phase, but like, how would you run a Rails app for an individual person from scratch on a server?
Well, we could talk about dealing with containers of some form on a server.
Mm-hmm.
We could deal with it as there's images elsewhere. Oh, I love the ticking
Yep.
thing. That makes me talk faster. But I think we will have to tackle that in more detail to get the implementation done, because there's certainly going to be some compromises we have to make.
Yeah. I mean, you could literally just, I mean, old school, everything's running on a server and you create a user
Mm-hmm.
on the VPS. You create a user with a directory with Puma running in it with a Rails app. There's a Git repo in that, and the agent and everything are running in that home directory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's basically a multi-tenant system when we do it
Mm-hmm.
that way. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Yeah.
I don't know that that's the product that how we would actually want it to work in the end, but it could be a reasonable first target.
Yeah, and I think when we start diving down into what is the MVP and what are the needs and
Yeah.
wants, we're going to have to, make those nearer choices, just
Okay.
to get us out of everything all at once
So
problem.
that's what we're going to do now. We're going to go back through these things, and maybe we'll realize we missed some and we can create them as we go, but we're going to go back through and do needs and wants. We're going to sort these things like we and this is different than defining the MVP. So our MVP might include things that we really want, that we don't need, um, because we think it needs that in order to be a viable product that people will actually use. But let's see where we end up when we just do needs and wants. So, oh, look, we're gonna have 25 minutes for this. So let me start a. Okay. Create a new Rails app with Thoughtbot's expected defaults. That's a need, right?
Yeah.
We could break it out if we wanted to create a new Rails app and then with Thoughtbot's expected defaults.
I I don't know that breaking it out gains
Okay.
us anything, because I think we'd say need to both.
Okay. Fair enough. You know what? I'm going to copy instead. Okay. Prompt a user for the app they want to build or the other way around.
And there's just the general conversation or chat interface that you need to have in order to talk to it. I
Right.
guess I just kind of
So we
assumed that all
need,
the way along.
so we, oops. So we need a chat interface. Is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Which means we also need, I don't know if I feel this way. This is back to the brainstorm. I was wondering, do I need an editable interface? Do I want to be changing the code along with the AI and have us basically riff off of one another? But
I think that that's a no. I think that is, if you want to do that, you can always get the code in an editor.
Yeah.
At least for MVP.
Yep.
Okay. So we do want to, do we need to prompt the user for the app they want to build? I think we do. Otherwise,
Yeah.
we don't know what to build.
Yeah. You don't want it and the user just staring at one another.
Okay. I think agent asking guiding questions to the user to identify the right product to build is a want. We want that.
Yeah. I'm good with that.
Ability to view the in-progress web app live. I think that's a want. Because you could always just be like, your web app's running on port 3000 or at this URL, and then they load it in a separate browser.
Which is still an ability to view the
Yeah,
end
so
product.
that's true. I was specifically thinking like a built-in ability, but
Yeah. Well, yeah, then we can just say built-in or
yeah, built-in ability. And then what we'll do is I think we need the ability for the user to view the web app.
yes.
That would be funny if we didn't give them that ability. We just prompt them a whole bunch. We have this whole conversation. We say, and then we just have the agent be like, "Okay, I'm generating it. Wow, it looks so great. It's amazing." And the agent just starts going off, and it didn't actually do anything.
See, now I was picturing one of those old style text-based adventure games where you're playing Zork and it describes the interface to you as it's going
Yeah,
along.
and it's like to click the submit button, type click submit button.
Yeah. Now you're in.
Ability to log ideas to a backlog or capturing tickets. So that's a want, right?
Yeah, it's a want. Yeah.
Identify the correct security model. I think that's a want.
Yeah, having a default one though is what I'm
Yeah, we have
playing
a
with.
separate card for that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Security from day one. I think that's part of our core value proposition.
Yeah.
Create an application with user accounts.
I am struggling to come up with one that doesn't need them. I suppose a landing page scenario might be, but ability to create an application with user accounts would be a need.
Yeah, if our goal is that we have an actual application, if our goal is just to be able to make prototypes, you can get away without real user accounts.
Mm-hmm.
But if our goal is to make a real application, I think you need it.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, if the tool uncovers unknowns, run the user through exercises to answer them. I think that's cool, but I think it's a want.
Mm-hmm.
Built-in versioning.
Yeah, you have to have that.
I think so.
I'm thinking about the other versioning cards there. How far does that need to go?
Mm-hmm. Versioning and Git. Well, what would we do if not Git?
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. It's not like there are alternatives to Git, but still, I'm still using a tool like that. So I'm good with versioning and Git being a need.
Okay.
I think it's kind of abstract otherwise.
GitHub integration. I think that's a want.
Yeah, I agree. It's going there too.
A backend service. That is Git backed doesn't really make sense for this one. A backend service that allows you to go from development to production so users can access your app. I think this is a want.
I agree. It may be one that turns into a need sooner than later, but yeah.
Right. Okay. Account team structure from day one.
The team structure. So when we wrote that, I'm trying to remember, did we mean?
I was talking about having that built into the data model if your app needs it from day one.
So if your app needs, because we already have
But I
user accounts
realize now
above.
you
Yeah.
were probably thinking it was saying the product itself having an account team structure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's actually go with that. Let's assume that. So that's probably a want, right?
No, because we want to separate people's apps from one another.
Ooh, I'm way off over here. Oh, I see what you're saying. We had a separate sandboxing card.
Did we? All right.
Yeah. I think this is a want, and then the sandboxing is a need.
I'm good with that. That was 20 minutes ago. You can tell I've lost it even with the cards there.
Keeping. Where is it?
I think it's further down. Scroll down.
Your server should be sandboxed from others.
Yeah, that's it. That one's the need.
Cool. Now I'm regretting copying the cards because we can't tell what we've moved over. Okay.
Security from day one is a need. I don't think
we had that. So we were on GitHub integration. So when we put that in as a want, ship with admin interface from day one. I think that's a want. Strictly speaking, I would say that's a want.
Yeah, that's where I was too.
Audit logging.
Want. It's kind of in the same boat. We're going to need it pretty quick, but maybe not immediately.
A comprehensive test suite.
Well, the adjectives get in my way a little bit, but definitely need a test suite.
Generating a test suite.
Yeah. Because we always wrestle with, it's like, well, what coverage or what?
Okay.
How comprehensive?
Here's the solution. The comprehensive version goes down into wants.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. A separate staging environment from production.
I think that's I was going need on that one.
Okay. I'll give it to you. I think it is a need. It might not be part of MVP, like the first version that we're aiming for.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Starting defaults for visual look and feel.
Yeah. We have to have something. So.
Yeah. Keeping documentation up to date as it goes along.
To want.
Mm-hmm. The ability to interrupt the agent and provide correction when it is going off track.
Well, if we do it right, then it's not a need, right?
I mean, I don't want to use the tool if it doesn't have this, but I think it is strictly speaking a want.
Right.
Accessibility from day one.
Need.
Okay.
The details of the accessibility or to what degree it goes are probably wants.
Hotwire Stimulus Turbo applications by default. I think that's technically a want, but
yeah, I'm thinking you get it for free to some degree anyway.
Yeah. Good defaults for CSS and front end development.
We already have the defaults for look and feel, so I'm going to argue that one's a want.
Mm-hmm. Okay, exception tracking. Well, strictly speaking, the tool will just be able to look at the exceptions and then fix them. No.
Well, not all exceptions.
I think exception tracking. I was going to say it's a want, but
I'm fine with it as a want because when we wrote the card, I think we were thinking, well, are you reporting to something like a air brake or sentry or something like
mm-hmm.
that? Um, when, because one way or the other, if an exception happens, it's gonna at least hang, it's
Right.
crash or what have you. That one's a want. I think the bug issue tracking.
I agree. Your server should be sandbox. Oh, we already pulled that one forward. Rails
Yeah,
application database backed. I think that's a need.
yeah.
Although on the stream that I was doing with Moses, we didn't do it that way. We were coming out of the sprint where a prototype had not been built, just some wireframes. And as a first pass, we were just implementing UI with no database models. Or I think we were just views, controllers, with all the data mocked out in the interfaces.
It would feel to me like removing the line about what we mean by need
Yeah.
around if we don't include that one.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. You could just do like an online calculator without it, but
Right. But I think if our goal is to create real applications with this, then you need it.
Yep.
Prompt the user with questions that lead to a unique UI that they like. That's a want.
Mm-hmm.
User does not need to set up Ruby on Rails development environment or any other development tools. I think that this is when we think about what the MVP might be, we might cut the corner and say,
Mm-hmm.
this is going to run on our computers and we're going to use our existing tools. From a product perspective, I think you need it.
That's exactly, yeah. I was thinking exactly the same way. It needs to be a need. It just may not make it to the MVP board.
Okay, this is fun. We're almost there. We're ahead of schedule. No training on user data.
Need.
Yeah. But we're not going to be able to sell ads or whatever.
Oh, well, that's a want. Go ahead and add a card for that as a want.
User has complete ownership of everything produced, licenses for open source, and have a license of our own to users for ownership.
It's a product that's a need.
I think this is where you could totally envision another company being like, no, like that's not our goal is to lock them in to staying on this platform.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, ability to edit all the source code for the application. I think that's a need. It could be a want though. What do you think?
So you mean it as in wherever you can edit it, we give you a mechanism, not edit it in our interface.
Right.
Okay. And then I'm on board with that. It does not take me very long in a lot of these systems to want at least, it's faster just to go ahead. Well, this is what I mean.
Right.
Now let's carry on.
Right. Okay, cool. With 9 minutes remaining, we made it through all the cards. We did have this assumptions and unknowns board down here, which we haven't used yet.
Well, we do have, how the stuff that is an unknown is probably, how would we do the database a certain way, or I think we've asked a couple of those questions as we've talked along.
How do we sandbox? How do we actually sandbox?
Yeah.
The application and services.
And how do we deal with the user not setting up a Ruby on Rails development environment, but still letting them edit the source code?
How do we not have the user set up a dev environment? I think we're saying this is implied in these questions, but is this product accessible on the web?
Mm-hmm.
Is sort of what we're actually saying.
Actually, that question that was asked earlier, what kind of interface are we thinking about? Probably capture that as a card there. I'm just reading through the individual blue cards. Backend service that allows you to go from development to production so users can access your app. Is that already captured in the other questions we asked? Maybe so.
Well, I mean, so if this is a server side product that the user is using and it's spinning up environments for each user for each application, then going to make that a version available at a production URL or a staging URL that other people can see is trivial, like, or not trivial, but like it's a matter of cloning that and making it available.
Yeah.
If we're generating this locally and it's all running locally in a container and all that stuff, then the ability to make that make your application accessible at a staging URL is a whole different can of hosting worms.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Got all the provision stuff in there. Yep.
Provisioned and hosted. I'm just going to throw a few curveballs. Is this built in Ruby?
Yes. That's
okay,
an
the assumption is that we're making is that this should all be built in Ruby.
Yes. Well, there'll be elements of JavaScript in it if for no other reason than we talked about stimulus, but yeah.
Can we, this was something we had, can we use SQL Lite in development mode?
Right. Another one is what LLM, how are we planning to deal with the foundational models and such? Are we going to have to train our own more special case models to make this viable? MCPs and all of that sort of stuff that will come up in.
Will we need to train or models to get the results we expect? You were going to say something?
Yeah, it's back in the wants category. I could imagine wanting the AI to generate seed data for me so I could explore its behavior, which now takes me into a whole host of other things like, okay, well, then what is it supposed to do with that? And what does it need to know from a domain standpoint for that to be suitable?
Yeah, cool.
Or even anonymizing production sort of data. Right. At some point, the want list just becomes everything I've ever dealt with in an application. But
anonymizing Oh, see, now you've done it.
Just had to keep talking. Yeah. It's unfair because you're doing all the typing. I'm not in
It
the same
also
spot because I would have my own words. Yeah.
anonymizing production data.
Mine's principal. I'll always mix the LE versus AL.
um, yeah. So our what LM are we going to use? Uh, uh, can we host it?
Yeah, because there's things like Olama and things like
Mm-hmm.
that are open source. We could do all sorts of things. Um,
I just don't know. I know some people at Thoughtbot have been doing some experimentation running models locally as a code assistant editor.
mhm.
I don't know that it's at the point where it's comparable to Claude Code or Codex.
Well, we've got all these different things that, and then this will come up more in the implementation when we get there. But we've talked about having another AI instance that's actually monitoring to make sure the first AI doesn't go off
Mm-hmm.
track. This AI is a judge sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you can imagine your core AI that's actually driving one aspect is hosted here, but this other one's hosted more
Right.
locally because it's more general purpose or what have you. And then we
Right.
get into the, reg sort of stuff with, what we're holding and where are we holding it. And so you've got all these different things kind of come together.
Yeah.
So there may not have to be one answer to some of these questions.
Mm-hmm.
It may be a tapestry of intelligence we create.
That's a product name right there.
Yeah,
Tapestry. Speaking of
tapestry.
which, if you're watching, we're looking for product names for this. So feel free to drop your suggestions in the comment.
Yeah.
Um, okay, well we can if there's nothing else top of mind for assumptions and unknowns, we can start to define our MVP.
I'm going to ask a question real quick, and it's fine if we just want to throw a card somewhere and come back to it because this could be a whole thing. But it is in the back of my head about worrying about things like Redis and jobs and so forth. There's emailing,
Mm-hmm.
all sorts of things. The problem I have with that is, well, okay, that's just features of the application you might be trying to build. But when we start talking about background services, how far do we want to go with that? So having some sort of, I guess,
Yeah.
recognition of bounds or at least determining it up front in the early stages will be a question that we have to answer.
Yeah. Well, the good news is that with solid queue, solid cache, like I can see just saying like that's what we're gonna do, and it answers a lot of those questions and makes it so that you don't need to spin a Redis and that kind of thing.
Okay. It's not like it won't come out
But
at some
email
point.
sending,
Yeah. 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 What are you going to do for your test bed for that versus actually supporting SMTP?
do you think it's a want?
I'm even okay throwing it down there in the assumptions thing and go, we assume we can do that, but
Hmm.
yeah, strictly speaking, it would be a want, I guess.
Okay. Okay. So now we're gonna define the MVP. Um, should we start with the needs? Yeah, I guess we should start with the needs. Let me start the timer. Okay. So for the first version of this application, I think we need to create a new Rails app.
Yes, that'd be good.
And we can just throw in with our defaults because why are we doing this if not that?
Right.
Chat interface.
Mm-hmm.
Security from day one.
Depends on how far we go with it. That's a question of degree.
I think what we should do, my suggestion for this is copy this card, but let's edit it a little bit to make it more clear that we're talking about basic application security controls from day one. Like basic, sorry, are we talking about authentication or authorization? That's the way we should talk about it.
You would want to have the mechanisms available to it. So for instance, if we were
Mhm.
using this, so yeah, bringing in, we immediately assume that we're going to have user accounts. We immediately assume that you're going to have to authorize. We don't assume that you're going to do anything fancy with them.
Okay, user accounts and authentication from day one.
Mm-hmm.
And then are we saying no authorization?
I would tend to want to do authorization, but say, everything's allowed, or have some sort of
Yeah.
default state of
So
that you could build on.
I think what we're saying is authorization infrastructure
Mm-hmm.
in from day one.
Yeah.
Good. I like that distinction.
And the other assumption that I have is you get things, like HTTPS for free, because that's just defaults in a Rails app nowadays.
Mhm.
But, some of the other sort of security from day one stuff is kind of already there.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, I'm not going to capture that. Built-in versioning.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine trying to use a tool like this that didn't have versioning of some kind. Oh man.
It's like writing your new app and just never getting to initial commit. You just keep going and go, I'll get there tomorrow.
Okay. User does not need to set up Ruby on Rails.
We talked about that. We
Develop.
may not require that on the MVP, and I think that's a good call, because we could spend a lot of time trying to get that working and not getting a chance to actually do. So if I look at this whole thing, the biggest risk is making sure we get that AI conversation working with what we're trying to build. And so I would want to make sure the biggest risk is what's like most forward. And I think a question like this probably takes us away from the biggest risk.
I think I agree with you that and this might be a case where when we think about what is the definition of minimum viable product, right? And a user does not need to set up, and then that combined with what we have under unknowns and assumptions around, is this a server side product or a client side product? Because we can solve, if we end up creating a server side product as the minimum viable product, then we've achieved this without even explicitly making it a goal.
True. And if we imagine that, we'll use it first to make sure that it's working right. In other words, it's a tool for us.
Right.
That this card won't necessarily apply, but to your point, when it does make more sense to broaden the users of it, we would
Actually,
contend with
let's
it
take
then.
a step back. What you just worded is a great thing. What is, let's define our MVP. Is the initial user of our minimum viable product us or an end user?
I think it makes sense for it to be us. We've done that before with these products. We're used to dealing with it. We know what we want those things to be. And we're going to do a lot of chasing if it's.
So I would propose that our MVP, or our target first version, is a tool we can use as part of the product design sprint that replaces what we currently do for creating our clickable prototypes, but that can be the foundation of the app post sprint. How does that sound?
That's great.
Okay, that's going to help us, I think, knowing that that's the case. And if that's the case, and I feel good about that, then needing to avoid setting up a Ruby development environment is not.
That made me think of another want though,
Mm-hmm.
which is we at some point will want to invite others from the client group to like join that
Mm-hmm.
potentially. In other words, we're kind of working together. We use our tool. We're kind of sitting alongside
It's
the
true.
client, and then we kind of go, well, they want to kind of take it over. When it gets far enough along, and I don't think that's MVP, but it gets far enough along, we just bring them in and they kind of carry it on.
Well, not only that, but if that is the target, then we need to be able to use it for testing
Yeah,
at the end of the sprint. So we've got to figure out a way for a user to be able to get to it.
yeah, yeah. So,
Now, there's ways of doing that. If it's running locally, you could use ngrok to open up a URL to it running locally. But I think identifying that as, so where was that you were saying?
I don't think we had that called out, being able to invite. We had the user account teams, but that's different than
Mm-hmm.
our inviting or pulling people into it, taking it over, or joining us for collaboration.
Right. And it's also different than a backend service that allows you to go from development to production.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I think what we're actually talking about here is a backend service that allows you to share the running app with others.
Well, yeah. It's who's collaborating with? Are they collaborating in using the app, or are they collaborating in building the
But
app?
we know for testing purposes, we need to be able to have others use it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Although, again, I just said we could use ngrok. And then we had you were talking about them being able to get at the code.
But I wasn't necessarily suggesting. So, well, okay. I don't.
So that
I'm
to me is the Git repo. If everything's
all
being
right.
stored in a Git repo, then we could transfer that to them. Is that what you're talking about?
That would be the minimum level. The thing that was in mind that inspired the thought was what we were putting there in the green card was, oh, we get started with this, and then somebody else wants to join or collaborate or get going with it. It's not just the code; it's the conversation with the AI that provides some context for it. And so involving them, going, that kind of, our developers kind of got going that first couple of weeks, and then they've got someone that wants to join and participate with us. Yeah, they could go ahead and pull down the repo, but do they want to? At that point, you kind of went away from the rest of the AI. I could be of two minds. That's why, it's a want.
Yeah. So storing all of the context and conversations that went into the creation of the app and the ability to look back on it.
It's kind of a difficult thing with generative AI is being able to carry that forward when you deal with any complexity.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think strictly speaking, this is a want because, and when we think of MVP and what we would need, we don't do this. The way that we do this now is Figma board, Google Docs, or
Hmm.
Notion, or something like that.
And yeah, maybe that's what we'll end up doing in
Mm,
implementation is take advantage of the NCPs that integrate with those tools and records them there and then make them available back to the project or, however we're containing this so it can pick it back up and run with it. Yeah, maybe that's how we satisfy the want. So, but
so
I've
what do
just
we
seen the
need for
workflow there.
MVP? For
Yeah.
MVP, we need the ability to load in all the context from the sprint. But actually, isn't that just prompt a user for the app that they want to build? We got away from going through the cards. We should go through the cards.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Okay, I'm bringing over prompt a user for the application that they want to build. Ability to view the running web app. I think we
Yes.
need that.
Yeah. Now we're back to our adventure game with AI.
Create an application with user accounts.
I have a really hard time not having that in MVP.
Okay.
Plus, it shouldn't be a big taxing issue. We have gems for that.
Yeah. A separate staging environment from production. I think that is not needed for the MVP if the goal is for the sprint.
Yeah, I'm
Rails
fine with that.
application database backed.
Yeah, we got that. Some form of it.
User has complete ownership of everything produced. I think we need that. That's, I mean, a
Well,
promise we make to our customers in the sprint is that they own everything.
if that's what we mean by it, then
Mm-hmm.
I'm there with it. It's not the same thing as they got a user account and they can immediately start using it. But the concept that, they own it is fine.
Ability to edit all of the source code for the application. We need that. No training on user data.
We need that.
Okay. So agent asks guiding questions to the user to identify the right product to build. So that we don't need this for what we've defined the MVP because we perform this function.
Agreed. In fact, the effort of doing this over and over again will eventually lift those out.
Mm-hmm.
So, agree.
Prompt the user with questions that lead to a unique UI that they like. Again, we don't need to do that, or we do that.
Mm-hmm.
Identify the correct security model. I guess we do that.
Yeah, I'm fine leaving it as a want, or not having an MVP.
Storing all the context and conversations that went into the creation of the app and the ability to look back on it.
Well, if we go with the artifact solution, well, we're given how the MVP is defined,
Mm-hmm.
I would say this is an MVP. That's
It
not the
is.
same thing as, yeah, it is. It just doesn't necessarily need to be
Yep.
overly sophisticated for a first version.
Sure. A backend service that allows you to share the app with others. Oh, okay, we already did capture that. Yep. Okay, ability to log ideas. To a backlog or capturing tickets for ideas to come back to later.
We already do that. I'm okay with that being outside.
Okay. A backend service that allows you to go from development to production. We don't need that for our MVP target. We don't need anonymizing production data for our MVP target.
Mm-mm.
The ability to interrupt the agent and provide correction when it's going off track.
Yeah, we'll need that.
Generation of seed data. Oh, that's a really nice to have for the MVP.
It is. It is. I'm just worried it could be distracting.
Yeah. Hotwire's turbo stimulus applications by default.
Yeah.
Comprehensive test suite.
Did we pull over the other one, the one without it,
I
generating a test suite?
Did we skip it?
We might have.
Oh. Oh, okay. Yeah, we skipped these last three cards. Generating a test suite. Your server should be sandboxed from other users.
Yeah, we'll want that.
Strictly speaking, if we're only using it for Thoughtbot and it's only used for sprints.
I would still want to separate each
Okay.
project from one another.
We did versioning in Git. So, okay. So Hotwire, okay, generating comprehensive. So comprehensive was the one we were not gonna do. Okay, for the product itself, an account and team structure.
Because we pulled the other card over, I'm okay with leaving this off.
Okay. If the tool uncovers unknowns, run the user through exercises to answer them. We don't need that as part of the MVP. Bug issue tracking.
No, we'll get that anyway.
Okay. GitHub integration.
Awfully nice, but
yeah, if we have Git, then pushing up to GitHub is trivial.
Right. Yep.
Ship with admin interface from day one, meaning like administrate dashboards and everything for the data model.
The nature of the card suggests that every application would have that immediately. I think that doesn't have to necessarily be MVP, with the assumption that we can add that whenever we want.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Audit logging isn't necessary for our MVP target, I don't think.
No.
Keeping documentation up to date as it goes along.
No.
Okay.
I can always ask
Exception
it
tracking.
to do that.
Not for MVP.
Well,
good defaults for CSS and front end development. I think we want that. We did it.
It's done. We could just use it. We'll just dump all this right into the AI and it'll generate it for us.
You know, that might be the case. Okay, great. Well, let's move on to wrapping. What are we going to work on next episode and wrapping up?
Yeah, I mean, at least getting the Rails new part working, I would think.
Well, okay. So when we think about where we ended up here, we ended up with we're creating a tool for us to use. The first target is us to use during product design sprint. We freed ourselves up not to worry about not having a development environment set up. So, and we have the unknowns.
Yeah, you kind of have to do the hello world of this.
So it is almost like we know we can do this now. If I were to open Claude Code, I would be able to generate a new application and get started. So I feel like we need to make something that does that without Claude Code.
Well, yeah. So you do your application, you build your, so you're going to be forced to pick some sort of AI model, so I'm just going to keep going with the Claude option. But now you're tying it in with the APIs to call it directly in your own application to go ahead and be able to start that conversation or expose the, chat sort of piece. And then hook that up so it can actually store the code artifacts it creates so that we can actually, start driving the code. And so that's that kind of hello world, basic sort of end-to-end sort of path. um, that's trivial, but enough for us to start adding to and building on.
I think we are talking command line. Yes.
Yeah, so now we're thinking of this as a CLI tool.
No, I was just thinking what the hello world is.
Oh, what the application itself does?
Yeah, what the hello? Yeah, no, what the hello world of this product is, and it could
So,
be a server running, but it could also be a CLI where you're running just a script.
thinking through that. I'm trying to solve the build me an app that, or who do you want your audience to be? That's kind of where I'm starting, is that one card where we said,
Mm-hmm.
how do you get the conversation started?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we need whatever that interface is going to be. If I want to sit there and use a command line and say, well, you know, whatever the application name is, which we really need. So hopefully we've got some good comments. Um, and then,
Well, so we could like I'm just thinking about what the smallest possible hello world is. And for me, it would be a Ruby program that pulls in whatever gems it needs.
mhm.
And you pass in on the command line or to just one prompt, what do you want to build today? The answer to that question. And then it goes and it generates a Rails app with suspenders and begins to, and we have a set of prompts that say like test drive the creation of this application, and we let it do that thing. We'll have figured out how to put those pieces together in a Ruby script.
If that works, there will be, and this probably be a function of working in the hello world scenario. There will be a point where we want to start capturing, okay, what is the next iteration of this? Because
Mm-hmm.
going down too far down that path starts kind of giving inertia to whatever that interface is starting out as.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's going to be command line, you're running a script and all of that, that's, I think that's fine. I think that makes sense as hello world. That, you know, it's something that's definitely you can get a hold of. But I would probably want a card in a near term iteration that starts moving to closer to the overall end to end experience that I actually want to have going forward.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the experience we want to have when we're working in our sprints, you know, the way we called out the MVP, then that's fine. But if we actually do want it a little bit more of a hosted feel or a web sort of driven sort of experience, then we would probably want to migrate that or have it pop that up or show that to us or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the hello world, that makes sense. Actually, you could kind of have it self bootstrapping, like it generates the app that then takes you through the rest of the conversation. So
Generates a new Rails app using suspenders. Uh, LLM builds out a unique feature of the app idea with tests.
with test, yep. Suspenders doesn't immediately involve clearance, I don't think.
No, not anymore.
So we probably do want this to have that, given what we called out for user
Mm-hmm.
accounts. And Rue. Oh, suspenders does Rue now, doesn't it?
No, not
Oh,
yet.
okay. Okay.
I don't think so.
Might be in the alpha. That may not have been
Mm-hmm.
released yet.
So at the end of next episode, we will have that. Then I think looking ahead a little bit, I think the following episode, if not before, and we're not only going to work on this in the episodes in theory, because people might work on it during investment time, but I think the next thing in my mind would be what you were saying, which is an actual chat interface where you can then have a back and forth with the user, with the LM after this initial app creation happens, and moving this initial app creation then into that interface.
Yep. Yep. Cool. I can feel it almost done now.
It'll be interesting if this is a Rails app, because then we get really meta where you're running a Rails app in a browser, and then it's creating and spinning up another Rails app at like 3001.
Yep.
That's really cool.
Yeah. This is going to be a lot of fun.
It is going to be a lot of fun. Richard, thank you for joining me as we go on this new journey.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And thanks everybody for watching. If you've got ideas, questions, challenges about what we're doing here today, definitely leave a comment on the video wherever you're watching it, and we'll see it. If you need someone to help you create a new product idea, improve your existing product, you can always work with us to make that new application or improve something. Just get in touch at thoughtbot.com/hire-us, and we will love to have that conversation with you. And you can work with great folks like Richard to do that. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time. We'll be back next week at the same time, and we'll pick up right where we left off with this Hello World application. Oh, and we need name ideas.
Need name ideas.